with these videos, we're aiming to create an online library where if you don't manage to come to Full Circle or any of our events that we think are worth putting up, you can come in your own time and look at this video and learn about the topic.
Personally and as a company, we have a knowledge that in coffee we learn every day. So this is very important. Today I'm going to speak about processing and quality, and it's for us a little bit of a really broad content, and I'm going to focus the processing part based on what do you have to do, or what do you have to, or what attention to detail do you have to do in order to process a quality coffee. I'm going to speak a little bit of El Salvador coffee industry, just in case people here are not aware of El Salvador, but that will be quick. Then I'm going to speak what's behind coffee, the importance of understanding your processing capacity, and the importance of direct trade relationships. Coffee was introduced in El Salvador. Coffee was introduced in El Salvador in the 1740s. In the 1970s, El Salvador was the third biggest production in productivity per hectare, and it was among the top 5 players in the total production in the world. At the moment, we have stayed a little bit behind since the Civil War in the 1990s that lasted 12 years. The production came down due to the abandonment of farms and an agrarian land reform that really limited who the farms were owned by. 99% of our coffee is Arabica and shade grown. Our 68% is Bourbon and Pacamara, and also 29% is Pacas. Nowadays we're seeing a little bit of new varieties coming in, trying to adapt to climate change and the latest trends of leaf frost to see which varieties are more resistant and are tolerate to these diseases. We classify coffee based on altitude. From 600 to 800 meters, we call it a central standard. From 800 to 1,200 meters, we call it a high grown, and from strictly high grown is from 1,200 and above. Our industry, it's 22,000 producers, 225 millers, and 75 exporters. In the 1970s, we used to cultivate around 264,000 manzanas. One manzana is equivalent to 0.7 hectares, and nowadays we're cultivating around 160,000 manzanas. Here are coffee growing regions. The Apaneca-Ilamatepec mountain region is the biggest coffee growing region in El Salvador. That's where 100% of our production, our operation takes place, and where our coffees come from.
So Andres, why is such a big drop in production?
But it was such a big drop in production and in the areas, in the land, because of the abandon after the Civil War, and also the generation transition in coffee. Like new generations don't have much interest on the coffee business, and they are not following up with the farms. A little bit of our history. We're a family-owned company. I'm the 5th generation in coffee growing. This is my father and my brother, who are all very involved in the company, and we're very passionate. We're very passionate of what we do and of trying to learn every day and do our best in what we're doing. To produce quality, you need to get quality. So I'm gonna give a focus of also processing since the farm at the mill and establishing your objective. Like in coffee, there's different types of market. There's greens, there are inferiors, there's conventionals, there's specialty. There's many areas, and you have to, for each coffee you want to process, or each process, you have to establish your objective. You have to be clear on what you want to do or what you want to get. And here are some key factors for processing quality at a farm level. Since the seed selection, how well your seeds germinate, how well do you take care of your nursery, how well do you give you the necessary nutrients to your plantation, those nutrients that will then allow you to have a more homogeneous maturation that will help you to do an easier job in selective picking, which you can see the man there, and then an easier job for sorting the greens out. When you have more of a fully homogeneous harvest, it's easier for our collaborators to easily sort out the greens, and then for us to have a traceable product, to have a product that we assure from the farm perspective that is according to what we will be needing in the mills. Traceability is very important since the farm to us, because it's really important for us to have the traceability of their products since the farm until they are loaded and dispatched in the containers.
And it's your input into this that makes such a consistent red cherry ripening?
Yeah, it has to do, there's several inputs, like the altitude, the microclimates that play a really important role on how fast a coffee could maturate, but it has to do a lot of the nutrition, of adding up to the plant what they really need year through year. And there's another important key factors of processing quality at the wet mill. We do our first and most important part is to do a cherry evaluation of every single lot that arrives to the mill. Our staff here, this is Raul, which is our quality control manager, but they have to evaluate and measure how many pounds of cherry, how many cherries gives us 1 pound, because that can be a tendency of what will be the industrial conversion of cherry to green in the mill. Also, we have to play a lot of importance to our cherry allocation capacity, because if I would try to process 5 or 10 different coffees per day, or want to have the traceability of different varieties, I do need to have where do I will place that coffee in order for it to be more easy to process. I need to understand my processing flow. I need to understand what process will I process first, second, or which varieties, in order to avoid any cross-contamination from process to process or from variety to variety. I also need to know about the quality of the water I'm processing my coffee with. At JASAL, most of our washed coffees, we do mechanical mucilage removal. So we don't use much of our fermentation tanks anymore, because we're mechanically removing the mucilage. We are saving around 2 million gallons of water per year, per crop. Since the last 5 years, we invested in a mechanically mucilage removal machine. And then the cleanliness, maintenance, and the calibration of the machines. For instance, this is very important, because I would then talk about defects that occur or happen because of coffee processing, and we are very strict on cleaning each lot. For instance, if I will do a red honey or a honey, I will clean all my flow instead of after processing the next coffee, either if it's washed or other type of process, or the calibration. For instance, if I'm washing or depulping a Pacamara variety that the bean is longer, it's more dense, I need to calibrate my pulper according to the variety in order to avoid cuts from the machine that will be then a defect in when I'm preparing the coffee for shipment. And I have to understand what's my drying capacity, and this is very important because when we have the coffee already washed or just depulped, we have to have a place to dry the coffee, especially if we're doing a special lot preparation. We have to make sure the coffee goes to patio or raised table immediately. We cannot leave that coffee in bags sitting down under the sun where the temperature is high, and if it's unattended, we can cause fermentation process to begin. So it's very important to take the coffee to your patio or raised table or mechanical drying if that's the case. And then the drying conditions and the storage conditions. For me, especially, like, the drying is one of the most important stages in coffee processing, and it's very important to measure key variables such as time, temperature, and relative humidity. We are measuring that on a constant basis with all of our lots in order to make sure all our variables are controlled, and if not, to take immediate actions to avoid anything, and especially to avoid a fermentation. And ending with understanding your bricks. For us, it's very important to depending of what process we are going to select, we have like a bricks tolerable from 23 bricks and above. For naturals and honeys, we wish to have 25 bricks and above in order to have more sugars in the coffee and to make it the quality better. So here it's an example of what I say. You have the cherry allocation, the traceability. In each tank, we can fit up like 50 bags of cherry. So this gives us an opportunity to easily separate and have the traceability of different lots. Here is only 4 different tanks, but at the back we have other small tanks. So each of these lots is processed independently. No matter which process we are selecting, if it's wash, pull natural, or natural, this is our coffee going right before the depulper, and here's right after the depulper. And here is an example of what I was telling. The cleanliness and every day we clean the machinery in order to avoid any remaining of the previous day's lots or process that can avoid cross-contamination with the next day's lot or with the same day batch of a different coffee. So quality on the wet mill. As I said, this is a very fundamental part of the quality of the end product. The processing at the mill can be a really important determinant of what will be the outcome of the cup quality that we are shipping. In the mill, we also look at trying to adapt to new processing methods. I'm going to speak with that after, and how we take a decision on this. And at the mill, it's a very important stage where producers and exporters can make a difference, because nowadays, for instance, in El Salvador, after the leaf frost attack in 2012, we have been seeing that the Bourbon varieties are one of the most difficult to manage with. And that's really unfortunately because it's what El Salvador has been known for years, and it's what the quality El Salvador has been known for its Bourbon and for its Pacas. So there are more sustainable varieties that are more resistant to leaf rust and other pests and diseases that we can tweak a little bit in the processing, that they might not be known before for having the best cup, but if you do a well-controlled, a well-developed processing at the mill, you can adapt to the final cup. So how do we choose a processing method? Like, first is trial and error. We have a really active staff that really is thinking on a daily basis what we can do better. Since leaving a little bit of mucilage or how we are drying or how many times under shade, all these variables they take into consideration. We also take a look and research of how other colleagues and other producer countries processing, how many hours are they soaking, for instance, their wash coffees and so, and we try to offer the same processing techniques and methods that they are doing in other countries. And long-term relationships and consumption trends that really our colleagues, roasters that visit, they share, I have seen or I'm buying a coffee in Kenya or Ethiopia that is processed this way. Can we do the same in El Salvador? And we're very open to that, and that's another way we can start choosing new processing methods. So here are the processing methods we do use at JASAL. The regular wash, the soaking, the double soaking, pulp natural, and the yellow, red, and black honey, which we are beginning to learn every day on how to optimize this coffee production, this process, and 100% natural.
So, can you process soaking or double soaking? Do you still use the demucilage? Or
yeah. And in the double soak, in the Kenya process, yes, and I'm gonna, just in the next slide, I'm gonna talk directly, but no, don't worry. So the wash is, most of their coffee is washed, 80% is washed, and this is mechanical mucilage removal. Our target is to remove 90% or more of mucilage, and each lot is identified by a barcode, and it goes to patio, and that barcode will be the lot ID number until it leaves our facility. So the main difference between Kenya process and double soak for us is that soak process, they are washed and mucilage is removed mechanically. Then after they are removed mechanically, the coffee is placed on our traditional fermentation tanks for 10 to 12 hours, and they are soaked in those tanks with clean water for 12 hours. The floaters are removed every 2 hours by our staff, and then we drain the water and wash it again before going to patio, like to create the flow for the coffee to patio. They are washed again. And the double wash, we do use the traditional fermentation process to remove mucilage, the traditional fermentation. Then we drain the water that was used for fermentation purposes. We add up clean water and then soaked for another 12 hours. So the double wash, depending on how fast does the fermentation occurs in the early stage, it can take from 8 to 12 hours depending of variables like temperatures and others. The double wash is soaked underwater from 20 to 24 hours. And once again, floaters are removed, and each of them are dried on patios or raised tables depending on our capacity. The most important result that we have seen from this processing is the shelf life of the coffee. Like if I compare a traditional wash to a soaked or a double soaked, 9 months after shipment or 10 months after shipment, the cup attributes of our soaked or as a double washed are still there. In a washed coffee, you might see an old crop coming in before, and with these two processes, we have been monitoring over a year, and the cup attributes are still fresh and no old crop.
Sorry, what was before, when you started to use this process, what you were doing before?
We were just doing the regular wash, that is, it's mechanical mucilage removal to patio, and before we had the mechanical mucilage removal machine, which is called desmucilaginadora. We used the traditional fermentation, but after fermentation, it was taken, once the mucilage was removed, it was taken directly to patio. It was not soaked for 10 to 12 hours. So here's a look. You can look, obviously when we talk about a coffee that has been underwater 10 to 12 hours in a soaked, or almost 24 hours in a double wash, there's a difference on how they will look, on how this coffee tends to be more washed. And 100% you don't see any mucilage. And in a regular wash, you see a little bit like 5% of mucilage that's still in the parchment. So that's the visual difference that you can be seeing from a traditional wash and a soaked coffee. Then I'm gonna talk about semi-wash and honeys. The yellow, in the company, this is how we classify yellow, red, and black, because we understand there's sometimes different terminology or different type of process per each country or per each producer. But I believe that the importance is for each producer to be able to explain and how they separate and how they manage each process independently. Our yellow honey, we remove approximately 50% of the mucilage, and this, you might ask me, how is this done? And this is, we calibrate the water pressure that's being used for washing the coffee in order in order for us to be able to leave around 50% of the mucilage. All this coffee is dried 100% under the sun, either in patio or raised bed, and in constant movement. This is very important, especially throughout the day where the temperatures can be very high. And I'm going to talk about the importance of this later on my slide in coffee drying. But normally at JASAL, the coffee, each lot is being moved like every half an hour from 8 to 5 p.m. The red honey, approximately 25% of the mucilage is removed. It's dried also in patio or African bed, and it's not covered at all unless there is a really high humidity. And also we do constant movement on it. And the black honey is where we leave 100% of our mucilage, and it's dried under shade. That's why you can see more of a mucilage presence in the black, and with lower flow. The drying times for the black mucilage could take us from 20 days and above, almost to 30 days sometimes. It's critical, but if you're controlling your critical variables that you can have here with temperature, time, and relative humidity, if it's well controlled, it's something that you can manage.
So the blue is under.
Sorry?
Is under UV light.
Yeah.
The photograph is under UV. Is it?
The black?
No, you've got the beans are blue. There's blue. Is it? Am I seeing blue?
Yeah, it's like bluish black, but yeah, I think it's the TV. Huh? And our naturals, now we're starting to soak our naturals, like wash them. The first important part is to lower the temperature that they are coming from the fields. The coffee is coming really stressed after the harvest, to try to make the temperature more homogeneous, and also to do a first cleanup in the coffee, to remove all the floaters, all the tree sticks that we can see that are arriving with the batch, and then they are separated in really thin layers, like only one layer. We do only one layer for the first 3 days. After the first 3 days and above, we can do the layer of the coffee a little bit more thick, from 5 to 10 centimeters, but not over that. Also, the naturals is very important for constant movement. Every half an hour we do the same, so it's a lot of work behind, but it's also very important to give airflow to the whole batch.
Andres, here in the naturals, how do you manage? I know that for naturals in other countries, they try to keep the fruit intact without breaking the skin to avoid the juice kind of being wasted. How do you manage this?
Well, the most important thing about this is what I've mentioned first, is at the beginning, like only leave a single layer in order for not having the women standing on it since the first day. When we have a single layer, we try to assure that the airflow tries to be homogeneous to that single cherry. If we use thick layers and we leave it unattended, we will have only sun for the layers above and no sun for the layers below. So by leaving the single layers, and after 3 days, the coffees now are more ready for the movement and to be managed, and to reduce that pulp peeling and so. So here it's a little bit of the cup profiles that we have seen. The traditional washed is tends to be a chocolate, caramel, good structure, and is the most clean, obviously, in the cup, and most consistent and balanced. The pulp natural tends to, and honeys, they tend to increase in their acidity, more fruit presence, and more sweetness. The yellow honey, it's sweet. You start to see some fruit notes. The red honey, it's even sweeter, and the attributes of red fruits and more body are there. And the black honey is for us the most heavy mouthfeel, with dark fruits and dark chocolate body. It can also be found in the cup. And natural are even heavier body, more fruit and wine, and more exotic and funky. But this obviously can vary from copper to copper, but are some of the most characteristic notes we have find for each process.
And the washed is the best?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the importance of drying, our main target is to dry, to bring down the humidity in the coffee to around 10%, and this may vary. This also varies a lot depending on the country you're in, and where is your mill or your drying facility, and the temperature and relative humidity in where is your mill located. Because if you are really humid areas that your coffee will be stored for many months since the day you harvest, it's better to bring the coffee down until 9.5 or 10, because you know you're gonna gain 1% or 2 while your coffee is resting in the storage facility. And if you're in very dry locations, vice versa, you wanna leave it your coffee until like at 13% in order for it to reduce until 11 for shipment. The coffee beans are dried from the center to the outer part. So this is very important, because when we rush the drying, obviously the coffee, when we rush, we'll dry it from the outer to the inner. But there will still be water activity in the inner part. So if we rush the drying and we take the coffee to the storage facility in 1 month or 2, that coffee, the water in the inner part will make the humidity go back again, and you will be seeing problems or in the cup. We use different types of drying. This is our patio dries, and we also have the raised tables that surround our patios, and the mechanical and vertical and horizontal dryers. The most important part of this in the patios is to try to also control your temperature, to monitor each time a coffee is placed into a patio. We take readings of what is the temperature of the patio itself, and what is the temperature of the coffee since the beginning and to the end. Also, the cleanliness of the patio is very important. For instance, if I have a patio where I have processed a natural of a honey, I really need to be sure it's 100% clean before I will send a wash coffee later. Because if not, I also a fermentation can occur in the patio or so if I don't take care of this. Also with the raised tables, we do use a little bit of a material called mesh instead of using like more, it's called alambre, wire, in order to use wire, because the wire tends to create a rust, it tends to oxidize. So that's not good for the coffee also. And in the mechanical and vertical, it's also important to not exceed your temperatures for parchment over 40 or 45. And if we don't use our mechanical dryers for cherry, but if I read, and if you're using cherry for using mechanical dryer, not exceeding 45 or 50 degrees. Here are some important variables to take in consideration while drying coffee: time, temperature, humidity, location, space, surface temperature, the width of the layer, the movement, which type of process will you be using, if you have the hand labor necessary to move the coffee, what is your daily volume, and your processing capacity. The processing capacity is very important, because I might have the space for one day, but if I don't have the space or the necessary planification of what's being delivered that week, I might have a problem. So this is also very important to monitor on a daily basis.
Andres, we saw something quite innovative recently in Nicaragua. They had some patios that had that black mesh, that net you're mentioning, stretched over spent parchment husks. So it was giving a little bit more ventilation. Of course, being black, it was quite a decent temperature.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was nice to walk on, so the workers got some benefit from it.
Yeah, I think it's...
They laid it directly over the beans? Or there was
the beans on over...
Yeah, with the spent parchment husks. So it was on a bed of spent parchment over a whole huge patio.
Yeah.
They were able to put shovels on it and fling it up in the air and all sorts of... It wasn't ripping the mesh.
And it's also because they use a lot of
grass. I mean, they used to dry on grass,
Yeah,
not on cement.
that's why I was going to. It's also when you're limited on space, if you can take alternatives to use this type of material in other surfaces that like.
I suppose the grass growing out the edge as well.
Yeah, they burn the grass and they can dry anywhere with that kind of techniques. So they are not using cement as much as El Salvador, for instance.
Andres, one question here. You know, in El Salvador, the traditional patios were built that way for a reason, right? Do you still rely on the traditional brick patios for your...
Personally, I do like the traditional brick patios, like the ones that are with clay, because if you monitor the temperature of the day, the temperature is more controlled. The cement, they tend to get more too hot. So if you go and measure the temperature at 12 of a cement and the brick and the traditional clay patios, there will be a great big difference. So the cement patios, you have to be very careful at the peak temperature hours during the day to move that coffee in order for the lot to be homogeneously dried.
Is that why I noticed coffee from El Salvador tend to last could go even 2 years if they were done dry, and now all of these put in the context of the drying is very important. This can go with good flavors for 2 years compared to other origins that in less than a year the coffee is pretty much tasteless.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna talk about storage. This can easily affect quality. Obviously, if you store a coffee with the you rush the drying and it's happening what I mentioned before, that the humidity is rising, you can tend to get an old crop taste really fast, even before the coffee has shipped itself. Then the relative humidity and the temperature, we recommend relative humidity not to exceed 60%, and the temperature should be stable around 20 to 21 degrees Celsius. You have to be controlling your pests and rodents in like 3 or 4 times a year, and have a good cleaning program. Like the warehouse has to be really clean. You have to avoid storing coffee near machines like your holder or other type of equipment that might have leaks of any type of grease or so that can then easily affect your parchment or your lots. This is very important, like to store coffee near the front door, because if you do that, the parchment tends to whiten. Your coffee, the green coffee, then will be starting to whiten, and that's a symbol of old crop also. Now, for us, most of our specialty coffee lots, we have a policy that they have to rest at our production facility 60 days or so before being shipment, in order for the cupping attributes to be more stable and to be more present. Now the drying mill phase here it starts with the hulling. What takes place here is the removal of the parchment or the removal of the cherry if it's a natural. Normally you remove the parchment or the cherry just before the shipment. You can do it before, but in instance if you have a humidity variation on a parchment or a cherry, if you have the coffee still in parchment and not in green, you can still do something about it. You can try to, if it's not raining, take it back to a patio or take it back to a drying. It's not the optimum. The optimum is to control and avoid these things to happen, but if the coffee is stored in green, you cannot do these things. Then after the hulling, after removing the outer layer, we do the screen size and weight sorters. Then we do the density sorters using a machine called Oliver, where we we separate defects and the coffees from first hand to second hand, depending on how dense are the coffees. Then we do electronic defect removal. Each lot of coffee, they cannot, or in our facility, the least that we can remove coffees electronically, it's until 5 defects. From 5 and below, we have to do an extra step, which is hand-sorted defect removal. Normally, these are clearer defects that the machines won't take out. And these are some of an example of some defects that can happen after from processing if you don't put close attention. These two, cherry pot and the broken and the parchment, they all have to do with machine calibration. If your pulper is not calibrated well enough for your variety you're processing, they will still be parts of the cherry on it, and it will cause a cherry pot defect. If your hulling or your pulper also is not calibrated for the variety you're processing, the bin can be cut, and they will establish like a reddish, like this reddish in the outer part, and that will be bad notes in the cup. Also in the hulling and in the density, hulling and the density, we need to remove all this foreign and the parchment, and for us the most difficult to remove is the fungus damage. The fungus damage is a defect that we have to remove hand sorted.
Where does the fungus come from? Because your processing is so clean and effective all the way through.
If it's all clean and you don't take good attention on the storage and a mold that starts to develop, that can be a cause of a fungus defect. And this for us is the most important, quality control. And as I say here, it's a top organization priority, and quality control, as mentioned before, starts from the farm. Start of assuring that for each contract we are receiving the coffee that we would expect to give us the best process in order to give the ideal cup or the ideal coffee that the contract is for. And after you understand all your key aspects, like of all the important of all your important controls, and our staff is very active on that, you can start to offer specific projects like Los Nogales projects that we have been working with DRWakefield, I believe, for 3 years, and it's of one farm from 18 hectares that we send to them from 25 to 30 different lots from one farm. So that there different varieties, different processes. So that's a really good example for a producer of differentiation. But once again, I reiterate the importance that we need to have all the key elements really understood in order to have all our variables controlled and offer a good result. The last part is for us as producers, the advantage of long-term relationship. First of all, it's a long-term perspective that really allows us to have a long-term planning on how we are going to cover our production costs, or what will be our income in sales, and therefore we have a sure income, and that will help us to determine how much we're going to invest in our plantations. Also, it's a term of transparency and allows you to access to more sustainable prices. Also, it's a terms of partnership and not a business transaction. Like I really enjoy when I talk to my friends, and they say, because I talked about the generation transition, and they say, why do you like being in the farms? And I ask, why do you like being in the office? They tend to be more in the office. But for me, like what I share is, coffee is not a business of just shaking hands. It's a business that goes beyond that. It's a partnership. It's a friendship that we develop over time, and that we help each other, because the roaster, the importer, helps us, and we are committed to give the importer and the roaster a constant quality product that will be sustainable for their growth and for their business preparations.
Well said. Great.
And that's it. Thank you. And if any questions, please let me know.